put some things on the board, and that's what Jamie, that's what she was referring to. She said, "Oh, I've got to see that. Let's see you teach that and break it down completely." Because I was actually going to take the passage of Scripture Jesus uses in John 3, you must be born again. It's a very common Christian ideology, and everybody believes it, embraces you must be born again. But the backlash of that whole idea is you must be born again so that you can go to heaven. In other words, you can't, if you're not born again, you can't go to heaven. And so the alternative to that is, since you're not born again, obviously you'll spend eternity in hell with Satan. That's the whole ideology about that. But if you do away with the Satan, you realize that your immune system in your physical body is really Satan, is that part that's antagonistic against sickness and disease and the things that happens in your body. And so if you didn't have the immune system, or in other words, if Satan wasn't working, that's what Satan is. It means he's against Satan. He stands against, well, what he stands against are the things that are unhealthy or harm the physical body. So if you do away with the literal devil, Satan, and do away with the hell, there's no place to go to, then you got to come back and say, where did the idea of you got to be born again? And so that's where people get into their experiences, right? I love people, embrace people who have their experience. And what was that experience? Jesus came to them. And since Jesus came to them, not literally, obviously, how did Jesus come? Through their experience. So they named this character Jesus in their experience, and he is real to them. Of course. But see, someone else has an experience, and that experience is transforming, changing, or healing to them, and they may not have given it that name, Jesus. It was their experience. So the experience is valid. That's what we have to embrace, is that experience is valid. Why? It releases a feeling or an emotion in us, and that emotion and that feeling is where the strength is at. It's powerful. It doesn't matter who you are or where we're at. So, I had shared some things, and I'm going to share several things from Scripture. I want to go back again to Genesis chapter 2, which we have talked considerable about over the last few weeks, about this one word, the host. And I just wanted to use this word, the host, again, just to bring our memory, to refresh our memory about a few things. So, in Genesis chapter 2, verse 1 says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them." Well, now if we break that down and come back and we look at both words, heaven and earth, and we realize they're not referring to two different places, but they're referring to the same place. The heaven referring to the two aspects of the physical body and spiritual body together. That's what heaven is. And then the earth being the ingredients that make that body, or in other words, the gases, the matter, the things that are coagulated, put together to make that body. And so when we realize this is what he's talking about something being completed, that which is first the natural and then the spiritual, and they are moved together in one entity. And that entity is a living entity. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a living entity, an insect, a tree, a bird, or a human. It doesn't matter. And in Genesis 1, he gives you all of these different analogies to create this thing I call the seven yoms, or the seven stickman, or the seven principles. And those seven principles are the principles of creation. So when I take the word host and I look at it and I realize I'm not talking about an army of angels somewhere out there, winged creatures, that are either fighting against each other or fighting with each other, whatever I believe that they are, but I begin to realize the hosts are the many manifold facets of the Elohim. Now I say all that, and again, All that's based off so many other things that we've said in the past. And I have to put the astrological wheel, I have to put the stick man up here to show all of this. And so I wanted to focus in on a couple of things about this host. So let me just do that real quickly. Let me go ahead and draw the circle. Seems like that one's kind of skipping a little bit. And in the middle of the circle, I'm going to go ahead and put the cardinal cross, because it becomes the key figure that we have to build it on. Now beside that, I'm going to put over here, I want to put the common figure that we all are familiar with. I'm going to put my stick man. I'm going to use it right good so we can see it. That one's not right good. That one's not right good. Okay. Okay, we can see him red, can't we?
Yep.
Red will show up. Okay. He's a happy stick man. Okay. The stick man, again, I use this analogy. It's a picture of me. It's a picture of you. It refers to us, humanity. So when I look at the astrological wheel, and I'll start right here with these divisions, because these are two of the major ones. This one's Aries, and this one is Libra. And in between here you have so you have 7 pieces of the pie right there. And those are major pieces of the pie that build the torso in the human body, the human structure. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And so and this is the host. When we look at these and we get a better picture of these, we'll begin to understand why they are constantly giving out information. And they constantly do. And so if you will go with me to Psalms 19, just real quickly flip over there, Psalms 19. And I want you to see something here in this passage about what I'm saying. And you'll see this, it's very clear. Psalms 19, verse 1, it says, the heavens declare. The word declare in Hebrew is kafar. The word kafar in Hebrew means to speak, or it means to dialogue or to talk. Now watch what it says. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows His handiworks. Day unto day utters speech. I mean, these words are clear. These are not hard. What kind of speech is every day? Every day is speaking at every angle, at every moment. Not with words that are audible. Speaking being more or less the emanation of the energy that's created. And what's behind this energy is, and this is something Kirby said just a minute ago, what's behind this energy is what we call God, or essence. And what is behind essence is life. And what's behind life is light. And what's behind light is love. These are the ingredients. And behind that is power. God can't be nothing less than that. But we have to realize that if that's emanating in me, I can't be nothing less than that. I am that. And so for us to get into all of the stuff that we get into in religion, because this and don't believe this, or this and don't believe this, or they get into fights, that's factions and fictions that we get into just living as human beings. That lessens us. That pulls us down. That doesn't build us up. Doesn't build anybody up. Doesn't strengthen anybody. But if we listen to this passage is referring to this entire astrological wheel. Or we can call it the Mazzaroth. That's what Job calls it, the Mazzaroth. The Mazzaroth or zoo in the sky, zoology, astrology. It's all referring to the same thing, and that's why you have characters in here. And all of these characters have things built inside them. If you look at Aries, Aries has what's known as 3 decans. A decan is 10 days. And there's each division of each sign is divided into 10 degrees, 10, 20, 30. So one piece of the pie, Aries, is 30 degrees with 3 decans. So in those decans, when you look at the astrological wheel, you have all kinds of different things. So when you come all the way around here and you have this conglomeration of the entire 360-degree circle of everything, we call it heaven. It's not. A better word for it is space. And we do use that sometimes in science, and they call it what? Outer space. Or then they call it inner space. Or then they call it stellar space. That's a whole lot better word for it than heaven. Because heaven is such a misused word that we don't even really recognize what the word is and what it means when it's used. So if we look at the host and we realize the hosts are the energies, are angles of all this space. And I look, between me and the door, and I could say, well, between me and the door, there's nothing. It's just empty space. There's no such thing as empty space. Space is filled with all of the essence, power, etc. that God is. Because God is that. So what is space? Space is God. So that makes God as everywhere and nowhere, all and in all. So, you see what I'm saying? Y'all grasp that, don't you? So when I put these angles up here, these different pieces of the pie, they have such profound meaning. And so I want to get into 2 of them here that go back thousands of years, and begin to be keynote symbols and signs in astrology that deal with 2 births. That deal with your physical birth and that deal with your spiritual birth. And this is what Jesus is talking about in John 3. When you go in there and you read that, and then anybody can really look at the book of John and you realize it's an esoteric gospel. It's not literal. The things in it aren't literal. The things in it are referring to the inner working of the Spirit in man. So, and we'll get over there to it, but right here in Psalms 19 verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament shows His handiworks, day unto day utters speech, night unto night shows knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. You get that? There's not any place on the earth where the hosts, these angles of energy that fill space, is not constantly emanating and so therefore speaking. So can you hear God out of nothing, out of midair? Absolutely. You can call it a thought, you can call it an impression, you can call it an idea. You see what I'm saying? It's constantly. That's what this passage is saying. There's not any place on this earth that's not heard with those words. He said, their voice, the word lion in King James, L-I-N-E, lion. Their line, it actually in the Revised Standard Version right here doesn't say line, it actually says voice. That's what it's referring to again in Hebrew. Their emanation of words. Their voice is gone out through all of the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. In them He hath set the tabernacle for the sun. Here's the tabernacle. The 12 signs, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 apostles, the 12 foundations of the city. This is the tabernacle in which God has placed the sun, S-U-N, as well as the sun, S-O-N. It's in the host. And so I want us to kind of grapple with that or look at that. Verse 5. Which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and rejoices as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of heaven, his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. And the heat thereof would be the fire of it. It's the things of the fire of the Spirit. So I want to show you something. I want you to look with me at something about these hosts and how they're constantly speaking. I want you to do that. Go with me to Genesis chapter 11. I want to use a character here. Just some rehearse some things to get to where I would like to finish. Or not finish, but to climax this. Genesis chapter 11 and verse 25. It says, and Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abraham, Nahor, and Haran. So you remember several weeks ago I went through there and I began to show you Adam and Eve had 3 children. Noah had 3 children. And Terah had 3 children. And all of those 3 children build this whole concept and this idea of the astrological wheel. You can go back and read the stories of those. I won't do that. But I wanted you to look at Terah. And who is Terah? And so if you will go with me to Judges chapter 17. What did Abram's father Terah do? What was his occupation? Most people say he built idols. And that's true. But it's not true if you look at his occupation as he was of Satan's company and he built idols, false things for people to worship. But if you look at it and you understand that he built images that were representatives or representations of higher things. And so it's hard, it's difficult to see it and look at it in the way it needs to be looked at. That's what Terah did. So now go with me to Judges. Judges, if you will, right over there. After the first 5 books is Moses, then after that Joshua and Judges. Judges, if you would go to Judges 17. I want to show you something here, let you see this, hopefully. Hopefully we can see it together. Judges 17. It says, and Micah's name, it's like I started years and years ago. I had one of my Bible teachers that really ministered to me way back in the late 70s and early 80s was Dr. Fuchsia Pickett. And one of her biggest things was types and shadows. She really hammered types and shadows. If you don't understand types and shadows, you never will understand the Bible. And she just kept on and on. She would say, types and shadows, that's it. You've got to get then she said, names and metaphors. People's names represent things. It's not just the person. You've got to see what they represent. And so that started me to looking at types and shadows and looking at names and see what they mean. Like one name means this, and one name means that. Well, this character, Micah, his name means to assimilate or to understand or to integrate, to pull things together. That's what his name means. And the reference of his name is an individual's awakening to the truth of his real being. That's what Micah represents. He represents a person who is awakening to the truth of his real being. So now if we have that idea of understanding Micah, let's see what happens with Micah. It says in verse 5, Judges 17:5, it says, and the man Micah had a house of gods. That word gods is Elohim. Same word in Genesis, that's for the capital G-O-D. It's the same identical word. So what is the Elohim? The Elohim are the hosts. Elohim is referring to the 12 astrological slices of the pie, including all of the decans of the entire ball of wax. That's who Elohim is. And so here it's got a little g with an S on the end of it, which is accurate. Not any less than putting a big G on the front of it and making it singular in Genesis chapter 1. That's inaccurate. Same word, same identical word. So the man Micah, this is the one who's awakening to the spiritual truth of who he is. That's what Micah represents. He had a house of gods, and he made an ephod, and he made a teraphim. This word teraphim is used quite a bit here in the book of Judges. Teraphim were images. These, you could call the Aries an image. If I did this, and I said, that's an image. Now, I don't care if I put it on a board or if I make a little picture out of it, if I carve it out of wood. And I said, this is an image. It's not an idol. It's an image. What is the image for? The image is to represent the energy of this 1/12 of the pie. So is that ungodly because I do that? No. It's a sign. It's a symbol. It's just an image. Now, that image can and does have power if I can understand it. And that's a part of the name of Micah. The name of Micah is understanding the truth. And I think there's one thing we lack so much is understanding, just simple understanding of names or characters or events or different things that's used. If we can understand that, many times it puts the pie together or puts the pieces of the puzzle together and makes them clearer. So, what was a teraphim? A teraphim was just an image. It's called an idol. That's what people say. Teraphims are idols. Right? I want to show you something here in just a moment. Look over in chapter 18, verse 14. Same Judges. It says, then answered the 5 men that went to spy out the country of Laish. And the word Laish, actually it means something that's strong and courageous. It is another word for a lion. The idea of a lion is a lion. If you are like the lion of the tribe of Judah, well, who is that? So Laish is like a type or personality of Jesus. Because wasn't Jesus called the Lion of the tribe of Judah? So when you take the word lion or Laish, what you're saying is we have courage. Why? Because we have understanding. Because if we get understanding, then that's exactly what courage will do. Courage will give me the ability to pull all of my thoughts that are going this and this and this way together and unify them and pull myself together. And without courage, we don't do anything. Right? You understand what I say? Courage takes courage. So that's what Laish represents. Then answered the 5 men that went out to spy out the country of Laish and said unto their brethren, do you not know that there is in these houses an ephod, a teraphim, and a graven image, molten images? Now therefore consider what you have to do. In other words, you better put it together to see what you're doing, to see what you have to do. Now I ain't going to say a whole lot more about that. I would like to spend a lot of time on a teraphim to establish the fact that these, we call them idols, when really should be called images, when really if we understand the characters that represent something. Now go with me to the book of Exodus. You know, a lot of scriptural drill here this morning. Exodus chapter 28. And I want you to look at this. And you remember in the book of Exodus is where God had an encounter with Moses and told Moses, I want you to build the tabernacle, I want you to build all of the furniture, I want you to build all of the articles, I want you to build the clothing, I want you to build all of this way. Y'all remember that? Yeah. So you're going through Exodus. You start with Exodus 19 where God calls the priest and said the priest is supposed to be this and this and this. Then I'm going to clothe him this and this and this way. And all of those different things. Now was that God? Well, we say it was. Well, let's just agree with that. Let's say, okay, that was God instructing them how to build the tabernacle. Well, what is the tabernacle? It's the human body. So it's actually instructions on how the human body is built and how it functions and how it works. So we're going to use a lot of different analogies or symbols. If you want to call these symbols or these signs something that idols, then okay, that's fine, you do that. But let's just look at this. Exodus chapter 28. And look at this verse. And everybody's familiar with what I'm fixing to read. Everybody's read this. Everybody knows about it. But hardly nobody talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They won't talk about it for a lot of reasons. So verse 30, Exodus 28, verse 30, and thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment. Now, wait just a minute. What is the breastplate? Y'all remember what the breastplate is? The breastplate is the priest. The high priest wore the breastplate. Well, what was the breastplate? It's this right here. But it's not in a circle. The breastplate is like this. It's 12. It's 3 wide, 4 long. And the priest, the high priest wore it. What did he wear? They're stones, aren't they? Each stone represents each one of the symbols in the astrological wheel. So what is he saying? He's saying, look, the astrological wheel worn on the breastplate of the high priest represents all of these facets of energy that's building, that protects, and that guides this physical body. But look at something else he did right here. Look at watch this. He said, put the breastplate of judgment on the back up, verse 30. And thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and Thummim. How many of you remember the Urim and Thummim? What was the Urim and Thummim? Well, we could call them dice, because basically that's what they were. So inside here, he had these Urim and Thummim, and when they would come to a situation, they would take those out and they would roll the dice to see what they were going. This was God's idea, folks. This is not imagery of Satan or satanic worship. What are they doing? They're getting directions, or they're getting answers, or they're getting the ideas or the energies they need to do and to make the decisions that they make. And they use a Urim and a Thummim to do that. And of course, there's a whole lot more can be said about the Urim and the Thummim and the different aspects of that energy that is God, because that energy is God. I wanted to read you just a little note here, real quickly. No such thing as empty space. Using the word heaven to describe space has and does throw us off the path or the track to the true meaning of heaven and space. They're not the same thing. Space is what space is. Heaven is what heaven is. And heaven is the two aspects. Shin Mem, Yod Mem. That's the Hebrew words that spell it. Waters above, waters below. It's referring to the two aspects of a physical body. The mystics' name for space is Ab. That's the Hebrew word for father or source. Ab. Su. S-O-O. The mystic's name for space is Absu. The word Ab in its meaning is father, not as a man or a human, but as the head or the source of the waters of knowledge. And then the word Su, actually S-O-O, is the invisible space or the acacia. All of us have heard of that. The acacia region. The acacia region is that region in space where knowledge is held and contained. And actually that's where all of us hold all of our information, is in the acacia records. And we've heard very little, not enough about that, but we have heard some about that. And so I wanted you to go with me now, if you will, to John chapter 3, and I'm going to try to tie this together. I wanted to read something to you from Alvin Boyd Kuhn. Let's see. Let me read this to you from Alvin Boyd Kuhn. And he says, using astrological basis for portraying cosmic truth, the ancients localized the birth of the natural man in the zodiacal house of Virgo. Okay? This is Virgo. Now, he's going back, we're going back thousands of years. Okay, we're going back 2, 4, 5,000 years BC, before Christ. And all this knowledge was available, and it was all shared, and it was all taught. Now, in Virgo, we have, if you look at this sign, I want to just kind of draw this sign, sort of, in a way. That's her hair. She's got a smile on her face here. She has her arm, okay, and her body. And she has this arm, this arm. Now this is a picture of a woman Y'all, can you get this? This is how she's pictured. Is it pretty close? Pretty good? Now, watch this. And this is exactly how it is in the astrological charts. I want you to pay attention because I'm going to read you a few things about this. How many of you always have heard that Virgo is the sign of the Virgin? Well, in Virgo, just like in Aries, just like in every sign, there are 3 decans. One of the decans in Virgo is a woman sitting in a chair, holding a baby, nursing it to her breast. That's one of the decans, and that one's called Coma. She has another decan, and that one is right here. It's actually the brightest star, and it's right on the equator. And in this is one of the key figures in the sign of Virgo. This one is called Spica. Have you ever heard of that? That's one of the, I'm just naming the different decans that's in this sign. And this one is called Spica. And in her hand, she's holding a handful of wheat that's ready to be harvested for grain. In other words, it's called a spike. That's what a spike is. That's why it's called spica, because it's referring to a head of wheat that's ready to be ground into flour to bake bread. So one of the greatest aspects about this symbol of Virgo is not necessarily the virgin, which is not a virgin, it's a young maiden. It's a woman who's had a child. But Virgo, one of the aspects about it is called bread, because of spica. It's right on the equator, right, and then right here again where her head is laid on this line is referring to her knowledge, and this was actually called House of Bread. House of Bread. All ancient mythologies, that's what they looked at Virgo, because of those things. And there's a lot more can be said about it than I'm saying this morning, but I'm just trying to get something out to you so you can see, because this is knowledge that needs to come to the forefront. We need to embrace it. And once we embrace it, the more we embrace it, the more we can understand who we are and get free. The astrological basis for portraying cosmic truth, the ancients localized the birth of the natural man in the zodiacal house of Virgo, and that of the spiritual man in the opposite house of Pisces. So if you come across the board, you always have to come across the opposite is Pisces. Pisces. And in Pisces you have two fishes, right? One going this way and one going this way. They're going in opposite directions. Now they are fish in water, and so actually Pisces represents fire. They represent the fishes in water. So let me read on just a little bit more. Because these opposite signs are always referring to the balance. Just exactly like this sign right here is the picture of the brain. And this sign right here is a picture of the pelvic, in which the pelvic, the two balance, the balance beams, the pelvic, the brain, the left and right. So you have to see, this sign, Aries, balances out this sign, Libra. It always works that way. And as you and I begin to find out where you are, like my birth is right here. I'm directly on this parallel line. So I get a part of both the Lion and Virgo, and I get a part of Aries and Pisces because I'm right on the cuff. So wherever you fit, no matter where you fit in here, like my granddaughter Rachel, she's right here. She's, let's see, where's she at? She's right in the middle. She's the 6th. She's December the 6th. Right there. And so the way that she would balance hers out, she would come right up through here to Gemini. And you see what I'm saying? Can y'all follow that? I mean, it's where you find your strength and your weakness. It's where you find your balance point. It's not just in your birth sign. it's in the opposite sign across from it. That's what gives you this balance. That's why you have the opposites. These opposites makes the 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The principle of 7 is all the way through Scripture. The principle of 7, the complete, is referring to the physical man, the physical body. So, read again here. The first was the virgin Virgo, the mother, the primeval symbol of the Virgin Mary thousands of years before there was a Virgin Mary. Virgo gave man his natural birth by water and became known as the water mother. Pisces gave him his birth by the fish and was dominated as the fish mother. The virgin mothers are all identified with water as their symbol. There are various different names: Mira, Mary, Venus, Typhon, etc. Goes on and on. Are all designations for water. On the other side, there are fish avatars: Vishnu, Iones, the dragon, different names. They stand for birth by spirit or by fire. So now, here's what he's saying. He's saying that Virgo represents the birth by physical. Pisces represents the birth by spiritual. So it doesn't matter what age you're in. That's just what those symbols represent. Now, I want you to think with me. In the stories, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all 4 of the Gospels, there are constant stories told by Jesus about fish and bread. Right? 2 fishes and 5 loaves. Always. 2 fishes and 5. Why is he always telling these stories? And when he tells these stories, he said he fed the multitude with the 2 fishes and the 5 loaves. Now, if we get an understanding of astrology and we begin to open our eyes to some deeper understanding and quit making these stories literal, we get to scratching our head. How are you going to feed 5,000 or 10,000 or 2,000 with 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread? And then you know what they just keep doing? They say, well, they just keep pulling into the basket, and when they pull it out, God just makes it manifest and grow back. And you know good and well those ideas, your mind bogs down. You say, how could that possibly? And then the best way to say that, well, with God all things is possible. If you just got faith, just believe, just trust God, and just keep pulling out that empty basket, just open that loaf, and God will just keep making more and more loaves. If we look at it and we get the understanding of these opposites, and we realize the balance of it is what God is trying to get us to see. Not the literal thing that someone did 2,000 years ago, because the story that Jesus was using was a story that was taken 2,000 to 5,000 years before that. The same story. Bread. Why? Because that's one of the major parts of this sign, this symbol, is the spica. And you can look at it in any astrological chart. She's sitting there and she has got that spica wheat, referring to bread. And when do you think in the seasons the farmers get their wheat? Right here. Fall of the year. When this is happening. What's happening? Well, the sun is going down. The sun is setting. The sun is going into fall, right? Going into winter, into darkness, into deeper matter. And what's happening over here in spring, in the springtime? The fishes. One fish is, what's he doing? He's going up. Resurrection, spirit. That's what the spirit, that's fire. It's beginning. Fire always goes up. So you have the up and the down. It's the balance. Comes us back and brings us to that place of balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I had got this astrological wheel out of another book, and I had copied it. I want to share a couple of things about it with you, but The fish and bread stories are predominant in Scripture because of the things I just showed you that have been known or were known hundreds, thousands of years before the stories of Jesus. The same stories, just told in different ways. So I'm just going to. I really wanted to elaborate a lot more on this part, on the fishes. And you know, a fish is in the water, but it's not of the water. Is that right? The Spirit of God is in the body, but it's not of the body. What is the body? The body is made up of the wheat, the natural elements, the earth, the chemical compound of the physical body. That's why this is the house of bread, and that's why this is the house of fire, fish. So when we start to see that, and we begin, and what happens right here when this fish crosses this line, that's the symbol of this fire. That's the symbol of Aries, fire. That's the symbol of spirit. So when Jesus is using the analogy in John 3, he said, you must be born again. Actually, the King James says again. I think any other translation says afresh or anew. And it really is simply referring to the awakening of who you are both as a spirit, in the earth. Jesus told his disciples in John 17, in that long discourse of prayer, whatever you want to call it, in John 17, he said, you're in the world, but you're not of it. The Spirit of God is in you, in the world, but it's not of it. It doesn't have to be ruled by it. It doesn't have to be dominated by it. Your physical body, on the Virgo side, it's made of the elements of it. And so, if we get a greater understanding of that, we can embrace more of who we are, more of what we have as power beings, so that we would realize that as essence is, I am. So if God is love, I am love. And so if God is light, I am light, because it's God in me, the source of my being. Amen. See, something to chew on.